Hello everyone, I'm John Euler. This is Journey to Healing. We're in the midst of a series on grief and loss, but we are taking an in-depth look into the subject of now we are setting boundaries. We've had to identify the people in our lives that may not intend the best for us, and that can be a significant hindrance into being able to set boundaries, to be able to bring calm to my life, to the situation, so that I can begin to heal from the past. So I have to be able to calm the present down, or try to begin to bring some sanity into my current situation so that I can heal and move on. Because if the current situation is stirred up, I will never be able to experience peace and rest, both in the current day and then also from healing. So we're looking at what are the key principles in implementing change. So we've gone through a few of them in before the break, and so now we're picking that up. The changes that I need to make will be unilateral. They have to depend on me. They have to start with me, and I have the right. So again, a person that has gotten to a point where they've morphed into a pig, they are not about to cooperate. They like how things are right now. So it's going to come down to me. If the boundaries are going to be implemented, the reason I'm having to implement them is the person likes how things are. That's why they are not changing. The changes will implement the right amount of truth and grace, and we talked about that in a previous segment. The key operating principle in any relationship at any point in time is truth and grace. The extent to which someone is well-intended, they receive more grace from us and less truth, because they will manage and monitor themselves. They operate with a sensitive conscience, so I really won't have to bring anything up. But to the extent that they start allowing their ego to grow, they violate their conscience. Now it's not grace that they need truth. And it will be the truth that will flush out and flush up the true nature of the person that I'm dealing with. Here's another principle in order to implement change. The changes will distinguish between guilt and shame. That's part of what I need to become clear about before I implement the changes. So if I have a hard time implementing change or boundaries, it will show me that I'm probably confused, because I will probably feel guilty about what I have the right to do. So if you find yourself feeling guilty about the prospect of corralling a selfish person, of implementing boundaries, then you're probably shame-based. You're probably dealing with guilt that is not accurate, not real, and not yours. Somebody guilted you. And that's why the selfish person will use that same tactic. They are professional at guilting other people. The changes will be unapologetic. They'll be polite but firm. So I will be implementing boundaries, but one of the key principles is, can I do it in an unapologetic fashion? Because if I apologize, if I start to qualify to the selfish person why I'm doing this, it's over, because they'll just have me for lunch, so to speak. And the way they're going to be implemented is polite but firm. Not nice, polite, and firm is not aggressive. Okay? The changes will be those things that are under your control. So it'll really cause me to separate out my stuff from theirs. The changes will not take into account the feelings of any pig. By this time, the pig's feelings don't matter. If you feel like they do, then go back to square one, meaning go back a couple of steps where I said the difference between guilt and shame. Okay, a pig is someone who does not feel badly about doing what they're doing. If they felt badly, they'd have a conscience and they would stop it. They would come back in humility, in brokenness and contrition, and own their stuff. They would acknowledge it. That's the word confess, to say the exact same thing as. They would say the exact same thing that you are in terms of the impact that what they've done has had on you. The reason they haven't done that is they are not sorry, and that's why they do not qualify for forgiveness, because they've never asked for it, and they've never asked for forgiveness in sincerity and truth. So you cannot forgive someone because it's impossible. You cannot forgive someone who hasn't asked for forgiveness because there's nothing on the table. Those are sentimental ideas, and we covered those. That's one of the myths. So you can go back to the program. We developed that in depth. The changes will not be up for negotiation. That's one of the key principles. You're simply going to be implementing the change. Oh, the wolf, the big bad wolf is going to start to try to negotiate a big pig. So forget the three little pigs. A selfish pig will try to negotiate, but those days are over. It's like when Saddam Hussein was captured, or the Navy SEALs got him in that little spider hole. He's coming out. He says, "I'm Saddam Hussein. I'm willing to negotiate." To the end. That's what they do. They think they have leverage. The changes will be in line with what is right, just, and fair, and that's where we will monitor and manage ourselves. The thing that will keep us from going too far and becoming vindictive is our conscience. So most people that have had a hard time with boundaries fear that they might become equally selfish. But if you keep in mind that as you pray for wisdom, you'll know what is right, just, and fair, that will keep you from going too far. The changes will not be personal to hurt the pig, but to protect you and protect your pearls. Okay, it's not about smashing the pig over the head. That's not why you're doing this. Okay, this is to finally protect you, protect yourself, and protect your kids if you have kids. The changes will inevitably be met with resistance, with pushback, and possible retaliation. And I would say likely retaliation. If you have not been honest for an extended period of time, there's a reason why. And probably a part of you senses that this is going to get ugly. And it will be the pig that's making it get ugly. They're in the mud. They have no problem flinging mud, pulling people in the mud. That's what they do. That's their nature. It's sad, but it's true. They pretty much don't have a conscience. The changes will simply compress time. And here's a key thing. This is why you're going to do boundaries, or why I recommend it. What do boundaries do? Oh, they'll bring calm. And that's important. If they didn't do anything else, that would be vital. But here's what they ultimately do. They allow you to simply see what was going to be true all along. They compress time. The reason why a part of you has been procrastinating, setting these boundaries, is you've been hoping against hope that those small little incremental positive things that you've seen, and we talked about the abuse cycle, manipulators, abusers, they're very predictable in how they do this. They want to disarm your intuition. So they will make you think that the good times are what is possible, that the times that the pig, after he went too far, or she went too far, that the happy person, or the person when they're happy, that's the real them. But it is not the real them. The real them, if you're dealing with an alcoholic, the real them is under the influence. And if you doubt that, tell them. Meaning, it's up to them to prove that. Meaning, their inhibitions come down. So what you're seeing is actually the true them. The true person is emerging. So what you're going to be doing by finally setting limits is you will find out whether or not that person was ever going to make a change and how long it would take. So once the boundary is established, you're going to be giving new information to the person. If the person intended the best and if they were ignorant, they didn't know, then there won't be a big deal. But if they start giving pushback, then you know that it was going to be this way for the next year, the next 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. And the question is this: if you could see yourself in the future, if you could project 5 years from now, if you found out that different time, different place, different age, but the dynamics were still the same, the level of disrespect, the abuse, was still the same, would that be okay with you? Probably not, and that's why you want to implement boundaries. Another principle is this: the changes will help you find out really what is true regarding the nature of the relationship, the extent to which the other person cares. They probably don't care, but you'll find out. And the extent to which any degree of intimacy or heart-to-heart connection will be possible in the future, and to what extent. Let me read that again. The changes, you implementing boundaries, will help to find out what really is true regarding the nature of the relationship, the extent to which they care, and the extent to which any degree of intimacy will be possible in the future, and to what extent. You're going to see unfold in front of you what kind of person you're dealing with, and therefore whether or not there's any possibility of any relationship in the future. You'll know, but you're only going to know that by implementing boundaries. The changes will take the form of limits. That's what boundaries are. You're actually going to be saying no, whether you say it or not. You're actually going to be telling the person no more, and that's why they're going to respond. And those changes are known as boundaries. So in order to bring about change, in order to ensure you're not casting pearls before swine, you're going to have to set limits. You're going to have to set boundaries. But those boundaries have to come from a position of strength. If you're half-baked, if you're not ready for that, do not start. Find a good therapist that can help you work through the issues that are preventing you from finally finding your voice, from being able to speak the truth in love, from being able to be iron sharpening iron and spurring one another on to loving good works. It's only until you have a solid piece of rebar in your spine that you will be able to withstand the big bad wolf when he starts to huff and puff, and he's going to, or she. We just passed Mother's Day a couple of weeks ago as this program is being recorded. How many women grin and bear it? And the question is this: why do you do that? Then it's not genuine. Right? You don't have an honest relationship with your mother. And quite frankly, it's probably her fault. Now, it may not be, but you'll never know unless you risk. You will never know what is true unless you risk. Risking takes verbalizing. You have to be honest. So if you grin and bear it surviving Mother's Day, then you're not being genuine, you're not being authentic, you're not being real, you're not being honest. It's time. Or how many Mother's Days is it going to take? Because it's going to come around next year. We all know that. Okay, some key prerequisites to making significant changes and implementing boundaries. So once you know who you're dealing with, once you become convinced of it, and once you become convinced of the reality that you have the right, that's the first part. And for the past number of weeks, that's what we've been looking at. Once you firmly know what you're looking at and firmly know that you have the right to make a change, and that those changes are going to require boundaries, they're going to require limits, and it's not going to look the same when it's over, probably. Once you see all that, once you're ready, then here are some principles, some key principles to making significant changes and implementing boundaries. And you have to be convinced that there is a need to implement change, that there's a requirement, that you have permission. Here's a principle, that the high cost of not implementing change is worse than what you're going to face. Meaning, to do nothing. What is the cost of doing nothing? You have to be firmly convinced. You also have to be ready for the pain of implementing change. There will be inconvenience. So one of the prerequisites, you have to be ready for it. And that's why a part of you has not implemented those. And that's understandable. but it's time. Okay, you have to understand there's going to be pain, and there's going to be change, and there's going to be inconvenience and daily impact. But what are you willing to pay for peace and rest, and for safety, for predictability, and for sanity? Isn't it time that you get rid of the other shoe that's hanging out there waiting to drop? If you feel like with that other person that it's always something, it's never enough, the other shoe is going to drop, what have you got to lose? Except your stress. It may be that there's hope for the relationship, but you won't know unless you risk. Unless you risk, you will never know what's true. But what you know is true is what you have. And if nothing ever changed, are you okay living the rest of your life like this? And then the question is, if you're an adult child, by the way, if you're thinking of a parent right now, when you go to, let's say you actually go to the person's funeral and you're giving a eulogy, can you really be honest? Are you able to be honest knowing that you haven't been honest or weren't honest prior to the person's death? I say it's time to let them know. You also have to be ready to face certain things. So you have to have the ability to face the fear, the retaliation, the impact. There's going to be impact. And that will probably be in the form of loneliness. If you're dealing with a significantly selfish individual, they probably are within a family system, and there's probably a lot of people that have aligned with or are equally as selfish. If you begin to make a change that is necessary, you could be the one that is ostracized. Or you may have to go what's called no contact, but let me qualify that. No contact should actually be the result of boundaries, where the limits and the boundaries you set are not honored, and therefore there is no contact because of them. Because your boundaries will match them. So it's not emotional reactivity. It's actually firm boundaries. But you will experience loneliness. The Christmas table likely could be much, much smaller. Maybe just 2 people. Thanksgiving will be very, very different. And each one that comes around, there's a bit of a loss. But better to have just 2 people around at that table that care about each other and respect each other and love each other and do not stab each other in the back or do not slander another person. Better to have that than to have this false sense of, well, at least I've got people in my life. Those aren't people. Those are a bunch of herd of pigs. So I'm not calling everybody there, but I'll tell you what, you'll find out. You implement boundaries, the pig will start to, they'll do a scorched earth policy, and then you will find out. Oftentimes, no one will call you, as far as other family members. They won't inquire. They will take the pig's word for it. And before you know it, they think you're the bad guy. That'll bring loss. It will never be the same. You have to be prepared for that. It will likely never be what it could have been. That's part of the tragedy of it. It should have and could have been different. And it will likely never be able to be in the future what it should have been able to be. It'll be different, but I'll tell you what, it's going to be calm. Better to go it alone than to have to prostitute yourself out as far as emotionally just having to put up with. And if somebody takes offense at that phrase, it's a powerful phrase. If it's all at your expense, then you're paying the price. What are you getting in return? You have to be ready for the reality of pigs. In order to have boundaries, you have to be able to face the reality that you have some pigs in your life. You have to look at the nature of them. You have to look at the danger of them. You also have to look at how the Lord feels about pigs. My opinion of pigs doesn't matter. I need truth, not human wisdom, to truly be free. There's a spiritual mandate not to deal with pigs in a relationship. The mandate to deal with pigs, the way Jesus did, is very, very clear. We have to have boundaries. The priority of putting pigs where they belong and not allowing any more time to pass or chances to be given, that is a high priority. I have to corral pigs. I have to corral them so that they're not in my home anymore. Now, am I recommending that some of you go and divorce tomorrow? I'm not recommending that whatsoever. I'm recommending that you simply implement what's in Proverbs chapter 26, 27, and 28, written 3,000 years ago. You will find that you will be forced then to begin to put distance, firm distance, between you and the pig. What will play out from there, in a way, is on them. And a lot of pigs, if they are your spouse, they will go and have an affair. They'll do something out of control. They'll do something crazy, sort of. And if they have an affair, then you are free. I have to be able to ensure there's a lock on the gate. That's another key thing that I have to be able to face. In order to implement boundaries, I have to be able to ensure there's a lock on the gate. Meaning, depending upon the nature of the pig, that there's no mutual détente, there's no happy medium, there's no meeting halfway, there's no common ground. Let me say that again. There's no common ground with a pig. There's no negotiating with a pig. The common ground comes when they stop being a pig. When they climb out of the mud, when they give it up in humility, in brokenness and contrition, they have the power to not become a pig. They became a pig on their own. They need to not be a pig on their own. If they choose not to, then they're telling you what is true. That they care more about themselves than you. And until they, in brokenness and contrition, meet the requirements of 1 John 1:9, which is, if we confess our sins, he's faithful and just to forgive us our sins and cleanse us from all unrighteousness. Meaning humility. I have to confess if I'm a pig. Pigs won't do that. And that's what you'll be finding out. To what extent are they a pig? And another prerequisite is this. We need wisdom. We need to ask for wisdom to know how to begin to implement changes that are not half-baked. Do not start implementing boundaries until you have rebar in your spine, until you are ready to face whatever comes your way, and until you do not need the other person's cooperation or agreement. Okay, that's half-baked. That's also what's called trauma bonding. You have to be able to go through the loss ahead of time. And you cannot be dependent upon the pig's agreement, perspective, or feelings. Because they're going to turn on the waterworks. They're going to try to manipulate you in any way possible. The key internal mechanisms that must be fully functioning in order to implement healthy and effective boundaries are conscience and intuition. What is our conscience? What is our intuition? Conscience and intuition are like radar systems. They tell us about boundaries. They tell us whether or not we've gone too far. That's conscience. Intuition will tell us intuitively whether or not somebody means us harm. We will be able to discern the motives. We'll be able to discern whether or not they mean us harm, whether or not they are going to do the right, just, and fair thing, or whether or not, little by little, they are encroaching, that they don't intend good things, that they're actually intending, little by little, to encroach more and more. That's why a pig, that's why a selfish person, that's why a manipulator will always get you to turn your intuition off, so that you have no meaningful ability to discern friend from foe, to discern whether they really do mean the best, or whether or not, like in 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verses 19 and 20, this is the beginning of the progression of abuse. That they are simply, year in and year out, going to be taking greater and greater advantage of you. You have to bring your intuition back. So the key mechanism prior to implementing boundaries that has to come back within you is your intuition. It's that part of you that says, you know what? I know that I know. And nobody can tell me otherwise. Now that's different than receiving input from decent people. But a manipulator will cause you to doubt yourself, will cause you to think it's you are the problem. If you were somehow just different, then everything would be fine. They are causing you to disengage your intuition, and therefore you're kind of flying blind, and you don't know what's coming at you, and that's why you're always surprised. But actually, they're simply just being very consistent. That's a good place to stop for today. We will pick it up at this point when we look at what are some of the ways that we're actually going to begin to implement boundaries on the next edition of Journey to Healing.
You've been listening to Journey to Healing, sponsored by SurvivorSupport.net. We trust you've been helped by the information our host, John Euler, has shared. To donate to this ministry, schedule a personal consultation with John, or to arrange a professional training for your church or organization with John, simply visit our website. On behalf of Survivor Support, we look forward to hearing from you and to have you join us next time on Journey to Healing.